We, my wife Lisa, 36, our children Emile, 10, and Stella, 8, and I, Lucas Francin, 37, were an average Scandinavian small-town VVV family. That simply means that we had a house, a Volvo V70, and a dog, a black Labrador named Vigo who had been with us since before the kids were born. Our modest two-story home sat on a quiet street lined with similar houses, each with well-tended gardens and the occasional trampoline or swing set in the yard. It was the kind of neighborhood where everyone knew each other, where the annual summer barbecue was the highlight of the social calendar, and where scandals were rare but delicious when they happened. Lisa and I met at a party 12 years ago. She was standing by the punch bowl, wearing a blue dress that matched her eyes, her blonde hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. I remember thinking she looked like someone I could build a life with, not in a calculating way, but in that instinctive manner that sometimes guides the most important decisions of our lives. We fell in love quickly, married within a year, and she is still a good-looking woman with her slender figure, bright smile, and that same blonde hair now styled in a practical bob. But she was in no way outstanding among her middle-class friends, most of whom shared her taste in fashion, her interest in interior design blogs, and her schedule of weekly gym classes. Our relationship was like many others, some ups, some downs, but never any real problems, neither economic nor in our love life. We had settled into a comfortable routine after 12 years together. Intimacy was regular, if not as frequent as in our early days, typically once or twice a week, usually on weekends when the kids were safely asleep. We'd occasionally try something new, but most often we knew each other's bodies well enough to ensure mutual satisfaction without much need for experimentation. I never suspected Lisa was doing anything behind my back, and I had no intentions of doing something behind her back myself. Nobody knows if such rare things as perfect families really exist, but if so, my family must have been rather close to that. Of course, we weren't living in some soap bubble and received many insights into unexpected relationship problems when several friends and acquaintances parted for different reasons. There was Marcus and Hannah who divorced after Marcus's gambling addiction emptied their savings account. Then there was Petra, who left her husband when he developed a drinking problem that turned him from a gentle giant into a surly bear. But the worst of them was when the wife next door was caught in her bed with her married boss, who happens to be a cousin of my wife. Anton Larson had been my friend since my university days. We had shared an apartment during our student years, and by one of those coincidences that life sometimes produces, we ended up buying houses on the same street. His wife Emma was a vivacious redhead who taught at a local daycare. She and Lisa became fast friends, often going shopping together or meeting for coffee, while Anton and I watched football matches on Sunday afternoons. Emma's affair with her boss, my wife's cousin Carl, had been a shock to everyone in our social circle. I remember the night Anton had discovered them, how he had come to our house at 2 a.m., his face ashen, his hands shaking as he drank the whiskey I poured him. The fact that the ex-neighbor Anton Larson was, and still is, my best friend and his wife Emma, was a good friend with Lisa, gave us a complete view into both our friends and my wife's cousin's dirty divorces. "I never thought she would do something like this," Anton had said that night, his voice hollow. 11 years of marriage, and she throws it away for that pompous jerk. Lisa had comforted him, had told him that some people just made terrible mistakes, that Emma would regret her actions. I remember her exact words. "Anyone who sacrifices a good marriage for a fling is an idiot who deserves what they get." How ironic those words would seem later. My own problems began in a totally innocent and unexpected way. Lisa works one Saturday a month, which is compensated for with free time after lunch every Wednesday. She really likes that deal so she can take care of her many errands while the kids are at school. She works as an administrative assistant at a local accounting firm, a job she's held since before we were married. The partners appreciate her efficiency and organization, and she enjoys the steady income and flexible hours that allow her to be home when the children return from school. That Wednesday in late April, I remembered that I had forgotten to ask her about doing an errand for me. I needed her to pick up a package from the post office that had been delivered while we were both at work. So I tried to call her on our home phone after lunch, but got no reply. I thought she was out and called her cell phone, also without getting a reply, which made me slightly confused. Lisa always answered her phone and was almost obsessive about it. If she missed a call, she would call back within minutes, apologizing profusely. We had recently bought identical new advanced smartphones. Lisa's main tool was the high-class camera that she used a lot for including pictures in the large number of messages she sent to friends and relatives. She cared less for most of the many other factory-included functions, several of them undeletable junk apps. I myself was more curious about all the possibilities and took my time to try most of those apps. Now I thought was the right time to use an app called Latitude, which would show me in a satellite picture where Lisa's phone was at that very moment. I had expected her to be at the mall or in the town center shopping area, but to my surprise, I could see she was in or at a house just outside of town. The map showed a blue dot in an area I knew consisted of newer homes, many of them built within the last 5 years. 1 hour later, I could see she was still there, but the third time I looked, she was in the supermarket where we usually shopped. A strange feeling settled in my stomach. Why would Lisa be at some house outside of town? And why hadn't she answered her phone? There could be innocent explanations, of course. Perhaps she was helping a friend with something. Maybe she had been shopping for a gift for my upcoming birthday and didn't want to spoil the surprise. But something didn't feel right. Back home after work, when I asked why she hadn't taken my call, she took up the phone, looked at her missed calls, and said, "Very strange indeed, because most of that time I was at the mall, together with Lena Norden, looking for a new skirt that I need to buy." Lena Norden was one of Lisa's colleagues, a petite brunette with a loud laugh who occasionally joined us for dinner parties. They weren't particularly close, which made Lisa's explanation even stranger. "Did you find any?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "No, but I hope for better luck the next time." "Do you intend to spend the whole weekend in fashion shops?" She smiled and replied, "No, it can wait until next Wednesday." I didn't make any further comments, but knew for sure that Lisa had told me a lie. That started a warning bell ringing in my head. I tried to convince myself that there might be an innocent explanation, that perhaps she was planning a surprise party for my birthday, or maybe she was helping someone who didn't want their situation known. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it began to grow. That night, I lay awake next to Lisa, listening to her even breathing as she slept. Had she changed recently? Had there been signs I had missed? She had been going to the gym more regularly and had bought some new lingerie a few months ago. But those weren't necessarily signs of infidelity. She had always been conscious about her appearance and had always enjoyed looking nice. The next day after work, I took a drive past the place where she had been the day before. It was on a road a short distance out of town, with forest on one side and houses on the other. Modern houses, most of them with large windows and sleek designs. There were good distances between the houses, so there couldn't be any doubt about the correct address where she had been. Then it was a piece of cake for me to find out that a school teacher by the name of Tommy Alm was the owner and living in that house. I sat in my car a little way down the road, staring at the house. It was a contemporary design, with large windows and a well-maintained garden. There was a silver Audi parked in the driveway. Everything about it spoke of taste and modest wealth. The kind of place a successful teacher might own. The kind of place where a man might entertain another man's wife. Further searching about him on the official sites on the web showed that he was 35 years old and had gotten a final divorce from a marriage without children only 3 months ago. He didn't work in our children's school, so it could hardly have been any school matters that had brought Lisa to his house. So, whatever her reason was to see this Tommy Alm at his home, it must have been some kind of private matter that she preferred not to tell me. That evening, I watched Lisa as she prepared dinner, chatting about her day at work and asking the children about school. She seemed perfectly normal, perfectly at ease. There was no guilt in her eyes, no nervousness in her movements. Had she become so good at lying? Or was I jumping to conclusions? Without any evidence that my dear wife was into some trouble with that Alm, I could not tell her I was using satellites and her own phone to spy on her doings. And neither could I accuse her of lying to me without getting further information about what she was into with this teacher, since it could be something totally innocent. But the doubt gnawed at me. I found myself checking her phone when she wasn't looking, scrolling through her messages and call history. There was nothing suspicious there, which only made me more suspicious. If she was having an affair, she was being careful about it. I started paying more attention to her routines. She showered as soon as she got home on Wednesdays, something I had never noticed before. Was she washing away the evidence of another man's touch? She had begun using a new perfume recently, a light floral scent that I didn't particularly like. Was she wearing it for someone else? However, next week on her free Wednesday afternoon, I was better prepared when the app on my phone showed that she was at his house again. My heart sank as I watched the little blue dot remain stationary at that address. I took off from my job for a couple of hours and pretended to be a bird watcher in the forest on the opposite roadside from Alm's house. I had brought a pair of binoculars that I normally used for actual bird watching and a thermos of coffee. I settled down behind a large tree with a good view of the house. Nobody saw me there hiding in the tight bush, but my binoculars gave me a perfect view of the target. Though it was obvious that Lisa's phone was in that house, I couldn't see her car, only his silver metallic Audi. Had he picked her up somewhere? Or had she parked her car somewhere else to avoid detection? I waited for almost an hour, sipping coffee that grew cold as the minutes ticked by. My mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. What if she was leaving me? What if she had been planning this for months? What about the children? How would they handle a divorce? Finally, I decided to make a move. I rang Lisa's cell phone, and when she replied after several rings, I asked, "Are you at the mall or going there today?" There was a slight hesitation before she answered, "Yes, I'm in a fashion shop at the mall. Why are you asking me that?" I could hear the lie in her voice now, a slight tremor that I might have missed if I hadn't known the truth. "Because I've hurt my back this morning. I wondered if you could buy me a jar of Tiger Balm at the pharmacy there at the mall." "Of course, my darling," she replied, her voice warm with concern that I now recognized as false. "I love you for that," I said, while my thought was what a lying woman. I hung up and returned to my surveillance, my heart pounding in my chest. All pretense of bird watching was gone now. I was a man watching his marriage collapse in real time, through the lens of a pair of binoculars. About a half hour later, Lisa and a man came out from the house, got into his car, and after a quick kiss in the front seat, they drove away. Now it was clear to me that I had witnessed a part of a disturbing game. It was not too difficult to imagine what had happened in the house. Tommy Alm was handsome in a conventional way, tall with dark hair and the kind of build that suggested he spent time in the gym. He had his hand on Lisa's back as they walked to the car, a gesture of familiarity that made my blood boil. The kiss was brief but intimate, the kind of kiss that spoke of a comfortable relationship rather than a first-time fling. I went back to my job, stayed 1 hour late to calm down, and when back home, I had Lisa massage my back with the Tiger Balm she had bought. Though there was no real problem with my back, it was a good excuse to avoid having intimacy with her. I couldn't bear the thought of touching her now, knowing where she had been, what she had done. "You seem tense," she said as she rubbed the balm into my back. "Is everything okay?" "Just work stress," I lied, marveling at how easy it was to deceive someone who trusted you. Is that how she felt when she lied to me? Was there a thrill in it for her, a sense of power in maintaining this secret life? That night, I lay awake again, this time planning what to do next. I could confront her, of course, demand the truth. But what would that achieve? She would deny it, or worse, confess and tell me she was leaving me for him. I needed to be strategic, to handle this in a way that would protect me and the children. Now it was high time to make plans to stop this farce. After some thinking, my decision was clear. I would do it alone, but if Anton Larson offered to help me, it would be even better. Anton had been through this before and had learned the hard way how to handle a cheating spouse, and I knew he would be eager to help me, to repay the support I had given him during his divorce. I called him the next day, asking if we could meet for a beer after work. We met at a local pub, one we frequented often, where the bartender knew us by name and would serve our usual drinks without asking. "What's up?" Anton asked as we settled into our usual corner booth. "You sounded serious on the phone." I told him everything, from the unanswered calls to the satellite tracking to the surveillance. As I spoke, I could see his expression change from concern to anger to a grim determination. When Anton heard about my problems, he shook his head several times and said, "I would never think that Lisa would do the same nonsense to you that Emma did to me. She must have gone crazy. She really must be totally nuts for terminating a marriage as good as yours." "I don't know if she's planning to leave me," I said. "Maybe it's just a fling for her, but I can't." "You can't let it go on," Anton finished for me. "And you shouldn't. This Tommy Alm, he needs to learn there are consequences for being with another man's wife." Then he suggested to me what to do, and offered to get me what I needed to do. I accepted. Anton had connections through his work in construction and had access to things that might be useful in our revenge. And he had experience in dealing with cheaters, having caught his own wife in the act. "We need to make a statement," Anton said. "Something they'll never forget." Who knew Lisa's intentions with Tommy Alm? Have a short-time affair? Or did she really love him and was waiting for the right time to leave me? For me, it didn't matter a bit. She had already soiled our marriage much more than I could take with my honor left intact. The next few days were a strange limbo. I went through the motions of normal life, went to work, played with the children, and watched TV with Lisa in the evenings. But everything felt hollow, like I was an actor in a play about a happy family. I kept checking the tracking app, confirming that Lisa was where she said she was most of the time. But every time she was a little late coming home, or when she took a call in another room, I felt the suspicion rising in me like bile. My dear wife had a strange look on her face when I declined her invitations for intimacy on both Friday and Saturday evenings due to my aching back. I could see the frustration in her eyes, perhaps even a hint of worry. Did she suspect that I knew? Was she afraid that I had somehow discovered her secret? I promised to see a doctor if the back wasn't better on Wednesday, so that put her in a slightly better mood. The next Wednesday was an exciting day. Both my friend Anton and I had taken off from our jobs after lunch, and now were sitting in his brother's car. It was a nondescript sedan, the kind that wouldn't attract attention. We were parked slightly off the main road, only a short distance from Tommy Alm's house. Our main interest was focused on the display of my smartphone, which showed that Lisa's phone had been at the mall for almost 1 hour and now was in the mall's main parking lot. Then it began moving in our direction. "That awful woman intends to do it again," I said, my voice tight with anger and hurt. Anton nodded but didn't say anything. His face was grim, his jaw set in determination. We guessed Lisa had eaten lunch at one of the restaurants in the mall, and now Tommy Alm had picked her up for their love session. The tracking app showed her phone moving steadily along the road from town, heading directly toward Tommy's house. "Are you sure about this?" Anton asked, his voice low. "Once we do this, there's no going back." I nodded. "I'm sure. She's made her choice. Now she has to live with the consequences." In the trunk of the car, was a 5-liter plastic drum that Anton had procured from a farmer friend of his. Its contents were something I preferred not to think about too closely, a mixture of pig excrement and urine that had been fermenting for several days. The smell was contained for now, but once opened, it would be overpowering. "Remember," Anton said as we watched Lisa's phone arrive at Tommy's house, "we're not just doing this for you. We're doing it for Emil and Stella too. No child deserves to have their family torn apart because their mother couldn't keep her vows." I thought about my children, Emil with his serious brown eyes and passion for soccer, Stella with her blonde pigtails and infectious laugh. How would they react when they learned their mother had betrayed us all? The thought made my chest ache. We gave them slightly more than 15 minutes in the house before we parked in his driveway. The silver Audi was there, but no sign of Lisa's car. He must have picked her up somewhere, perhaps at the mall as we had guessed. The house looked quiet, with curtains drawn across the large windows. "Ready?" Anton asked, his hand on the door handle. I nodded, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. We got out of the car, Anton carrying a small bag with tools we might need, and I held the plastic drum, careful not to spill any of its contents yet. Since the door was locked, we rang the bell. Nothing happened. The house remained silent, though I imagined I could hear muffled sounds from within. We rang again, and this time a male voice shouted, "Who are you?" "What do you want?" The voice was irritated, clearly annoyed at the interruption. Anton replied in a loud voice, "The electric power company. We have to check your meter. It will only take a minute." There was a pause, then footsteps approaching the door. I gripped the drum tighter, my palms sweaty. After a slight delay, the door was opened by a man in a black velvet dressing gown. Tommy Alm stood there, his hair disheveled, his expression transforming from annoyance to shock as he recognized me. That was the start signal for our action. Anton hit the man hard in his solar plexus, laying him out on the floor, and held him down there. Tommy wheezed, trying to catch his breath, his eyes wide with fear and confusion. I rushed past them into the house with the 5-liter plastic drum in my right hand, searching for the bedroom, which I found a few seconds later. The smell hit me first as I opened the bedroom door, the mingled sense of intimacy and Lisa's perfume, that new floral one I had come to hate. The room was dimly lit, the curtains drawn, but I could clearly see the tangled sheets of the bed and the scattered clothes on the floor. The sight in there put the definitive full stop to my marriage. In the bed, I could see a naked Lisa trying to hide under the sheet, her face a mask of horror as she recognized me. Our eyes met, and in that moment I saw everything: guilt, fear, and a desperate plea for mercy. "Lucas," she gasped, "please, it's not—" Without saying a word, I unscrewed the cap from my drum and poured some of its contents, a terrible stinking mix of pig waste and pig urine, over the pile of male and female clothes on a chair. The stench was immediate and overwhelming, filling the room with a foul miasma that made my eyes water. Then a naked, screaming Lisa ran into the bathroom and locked the door. I could hear her retching as the smell hit her. I continued pouring a fair amount of the stinking mixture on the very expensive-looking bed, then some in a wardrobe, and some on the soft carpet before I left the room. The bedroom was ruined, the white sheets now stained with the brown, foul-smelling liquid, the expensive-looking carpet soaked through. I took particular pleasure in pouring the mixture on what looked like an antique dresser, watching as it seeped into the wood grain. As I emerged from the bedroom, the stench followed me, clinging to my clothes. I could hear Lisa still retching in the bathroom, her sobs muffled by the door. Part of me felt a distant pity for her, but it was overshadowed by the raw hurt and anger that had driven me to this point. Back at the front door, Anton was still holding down the man on the floor. Tommy was gasping, his face red with the effort to breathe. When Anton saw me, he stood up and shouted to the man on the floor, "Try to move and I will crush your body." Tommy Alm didn't move, and Anton threw his dressing gown open so I could pour the remaining quantity of the stinking pig waste and pig urine mix, about 1.5 liters, on my soon-to-be ex-wife's naked lover boy. Tommy screamed as the foul liquid hit his skin, trying to scramble away but was pinned in place by Anton's foot on his chest. "That's for being with my wife," I said, emptying the last drops onto his face. He sputtered and choked, his eyes squeezed shut against the filth. Before we left, Anton warned Alm that the local vigilance committee would punish him if he or Lisa contacted the police. The local vigilance committee became well known after an action some time ago when a notorious drunk driver was found chained to a lamppost early on a Sunday morning outside a former police station. For some reason, it had taken a long time for the police patrol from the county capital to get there, and as they didn't know anybody in town, it had taken an even longer time for them to find a locksmith to cut off the chains. That episode was well written about in our local newspaper and even mentioned in the national tabloid newspapers. Tommy Alm understood what could happen and didn't dare to challenge the committee. "You'll keep your mouth shut about this if you know what's good for you," Anton growled, his foot still pressing down on Tommy's chest. "You think about that before you go sticking yourself where you don't belong again." We left the house, the stench of pig excrement following us out. I felt a savage satisfaction as I imagined the two of them trying to clean up the mess, their romantic afternoon ruined beyond salvation. As we drove away, I could see neighbors beginning to emerge from their houses, drawn by the commotion and probably the smell that would soon be wafting across the neighborhood. "You did good," Anton said as we drove back to town. "You stood up for yourself." I nodded, but I didn't feel like I had won anything. My marriage was over, my family shattered. The revenge had been sweet, but brief. Now came the hard part, rebuilding my life from the ruins. When I got home that evening, the house was empty. Lisa hadn't returned, and I knew she wouldn't. Not that night. Maybe not ever again. I called my sister and asked her to take the children for the night, saying Lisa and I needed to work through some things. Then I sat alone in our living room, surrounded by the photos of our family life, and allowed myself to cry for the first time since I had discovered Lisa's betrayal. The next day, I called in sick to work and spent the morning consulting with a lawyer about divorce proceedings. My lawyer, a stern woman in her 50s, listened to my story without judgment and then explained the process to me in clear terms. "Sweden is a no-fault divorce country," she explained. "You don't need to prove her infidelity, but it will be relevant when it comes to deciding on custody of the children." I nodded. "I want joint custody, but I want the children to live with me primarily. She can see them, but I want them to stay in their home, in their school." "We'll make that case," the lawyer said. "But be prepared for a fight. Courts tend to favor mothers in custody disputes, even in cases of infidelity." I left her office with a stack of forms to fill out and a heavy heart. The legalities of divorce seemed cold and impersonal compared to the emotional devastation I was experiencing. But it was necessary, a step toward closure. Lisa stayed away from home until Saturday morning when she brought her parents with her. They had been married for 40 years, were pillars of the community, and now looked at me with a mixture of sympathy and disappointment, as if I were somehow to blame for their daughter's actions. "This is between Lisa and me," I said firmly when her father tried to intervene. "I think it's best if you wait outside." They left reluctantly, and Lisa and I were alone in the kitchen, the same kitchen where we had shared family meals, where we had celebrated birthdays, where we had built a life together. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never meant for this to happen." "But it did happen," I replied. "And now we have to deal with the consequences." She signed the divorce papers without any arguing and packed up her clothes and other personal belongings. To my great relief, she didn't try any nonsense such as, "It was not what you thought it was," or "I'm sorry, it was a big mistake." She knew she had been caught red-handed, and her dignity, what little remained of it, prevented her from attempting to explain away the inexplicable. "What about the children?" she asked as she packed the last of her things into a suitcase. "When can I see them?" "We'll work out a schedule," I said. "But they'll stay with me in the house. I'm not uprooting them because of your mistakes." She flinched at that, but didn't argue. We even agreed about our children and the sharing of our bank accounts. Thus was ended our once-upon-a-time happy marriage of 12 years. The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings, therapy sessions for the children, and trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy in our shattered lives. Emile and Stella were confused and hurt, unable to understand why their mother had moved out. I tried to explain it in terms they could understand without demonizing Lisa or burdening them with adult concerns. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes," I told them as we sat together on the sofa one evening, "and sometimes those mistakes mean they can't live together anymore. But it doesn't change how much we both love you." Emile, always the more analytical of the two, had questions. "But why did Mom make a mistake? Didn't she love us enough?" "She loves you very much," I said, my heart breaking at the doubt in his eyes. "This isn't about you. It's about things between Mom and me that have nothing to do with how much we love you." Stella, more emotional, simply cried and asked when Mom was coming home. I had no answer that wouldn't make her cry anymore. Lisa saw the children on weekends, taking them to her parents' house where she was staying. They came back with stories of Grandma's cooking and the new toys Grandpa had bought them. It was clear that Lisa's parents were trying to make up for their daughter's mistakes, to ensure that their grandchildren didn't suffer for her sins. As for Tommy Alm, I heard through the grapevine that he had taken a leave of absence from his teaching job and was living in a rented trailer on his front lawn while his house was being professionally cleaned and renovated. The stench of pig excrement had permeated everything, the furniture, the carpets, even the walls. Insurance wouldn't cover the damage, classifying it as willful destruction rather than an accident. It would cost him thousands to make the house habitable again. I felt a grim satisfaction at that news. Let him pay, both financially and socially. In our small town, word had spread quickly about what had happened. The details were muddled, but the essential truth was known. Tommy Alm had been caught with another man's wife and had suffered the consequences. He was ostracized at work once he returned and found himself suddenly unwelcome in many of the town's social circles. In the weeks that followed, I learned more about the affair from mutual friends who had known but kept quiet. Lisa and Tommy had met 2 years ago during a girls' trip to Barcelona. He had been there on vacation with a friend, and they had bumped into each other at a bar. One thing had led to another, and they had spent a night together. Lisa had returned home feeling guilty, but exhilarated by the experience. Then, 3 months ago, Lisa had run into Tommy at a grocery store. He had moved to our town after his divorce, taking a job at the local high school. They had exchanged numbers, and the affair had reignited. According to one of Lisa's friends, she had been intoxicated by the attention, the excitement of the forbidden. She had convinced herself that it was harmless, that what I didn't know wouldn't hurt me. Now, it has been 9 weeks since I found my wife Lisa naked in Tommy Alm's bed, and our divorce will be final in about 4 months. My life is still in terrible turmoil, and I'm sure it will take a long time for me to return to a normal life again. Lisa is living with her parents, and Alm has moved into his house again. He had been living in a rented trailer on his front lawn while his house was restored after my attack with the stinking pig waste urine. The love story between Lisa and Tommy Alm lasted only 3 weeks after she left our house. She never moved into his trailer or his house and spent only some nights there. These became fewer and fewer every week. Cheating might be an exciting and romantic experience, but having a real relationship with the lover isn't always the main highway to happiness. At least it wasn't for my soon-to-be ex-wife. The gossip from Lisa's friends says that she and Tommy Alm had a fling when Lisa and 3 other wives spent a long weekend in Barcelona, Spain 2 years ago. and then they happened to meet again when he got a job and bought a house in our town after his wife left him. Her friends even said that a divorce from me had never been the goal for Lisa. She had only regarded Tommy Alm as a once-in-a-lifetime romantic fling and had intended to stop it the week before my action. But he had persuaded her to meet him one more time, which she now regretted like hell. But she didn't know it had already been too late to save our marriage, even a week earlier. However, today she knows one thing for sure: cheating stinks like hell. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.